Overtime was created by Matt Holman, founder of the EMW Foundation, and is made possible by the Prodigy Media Group and RPM Athlete Performance, with inspirational credit to my friend, Dr. Fred Obi. Welcome to Overtime, an open conversation series on racism in the sport of lacrosse. We hope you find this thought-provoking, educational, and it leaves you better prepared as a member of the lacrosse community. Thanks again for joining us, and now for this week's panel. Welcome to tonight's episode of Overtime. My name is Matt Holman, your host, and we've got a smaller but interesting group today. So I'll go ahead and introduce them one by one. First is Pete Natrall. Hey Pete, how you doing? Born and raised in the Squamish Nation on the west coast of British Columbia in the city of North Vancouver. Pete is as an Indigenous community member, he was heavily influenced by his grandfather and mother to be active, and he started organized lacrosse at the age of 11 with the North Vancouver Minor Lacrosse Association. Today, he continues his work on the community sport development level, and he has served as the manager of the Squamish Nation Shapeshifters, which is a traveling masters team. So we welcome Pete. We're waiting on one more guest here. Mr. Curtis Rountree is a native of Baltimore, and he's a self-proclaimed never leaving Maryland guy. Curtis was introduced to the game at the age of 9 when he began attending the St. Paul School. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland, where he was the team captain and an All-American player. He graduated with a degree in economics, and he continued his education, earning his master's in accounting from Loyola University in Baltimore. He's currently a practicing CPA, and he's a referee in the Southern Lacrosse Officials Association, which covers youth club, high school, and adult level, excuse me. So welcome, Curtis. Next, we have Javier Silva. Javier was born in Bogota, Colombia, excuse me, and he grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. I believe he came here when you were 5, that's right. So he was 15 and a junior in high school when he first started in lacrosse. He's been hooked ever since, and he presently is the executive director of the Lacrosse the Nations, excuse me, and assistant coach with the men's and women's Columbia national teams. So welcome, Javier. And right now, last but not least, Kevin Dugan. Kevin was born and raised in Avon, New Jersey. Kevin credits his cousin with buying him his first stick in 8th grade, which led to him starting his high school team, which didn't have one. And he wanted to keep playing, so he started his high school team. He went on to graduate from Notre Dame with a degree in finance. He's currently the club director for Sweetlax, Florida. So welcome, guests. I appreciate all of you taking the time. Oh, Samir and Colin. I knew I was going to screw that up. So we have Samir and Colin. They are actually two people. But Samir was born and raised in Los Angeles. His first exposure to lacrosse was at the age of 14 with his high school club team. He went on to play at UC Santa Cruz for the Banana Slugs, where he graduated as a film major. He created the popular TLN and continues as a professional filmmaker today. And joining us, luckily, is his partner in crime, Colin. And Colin, you're going to have to do a self-intro.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in New Jersey, started playing lacrosse at a young age, and then went and played in college at the University of Colorado. And then after I graduated, I started filming and telling stories about my team. And that's when I got linked up with Samir and moved to Los Angeles in 2013 and helped him build the Lacrosse Network. And I'm also today a filmmaker.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Colin, where in New Jersey? I can't believe we've never had this discussion.
So I am from Princeton Junction, so about 15 minutes outside of Princeton, central New Jersey.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
In the South, so you don't really matter to me, but you know, what's up? You're still
I consider it central. I consider it the middle.
You and I can agree on the Jersey corn and the tomatoes, and so can Kevin. So we'll get started. Again, appreciate you guys being here. You know, I took Friday night to yesterday afternoon off from social media and the actual news, and it was refreshing. But we are just bombarded with human rights issues, which is what I think it is human rights issue right now. So it's cool to have such a diverse group on right now and different perspectives, different angles where you're involved in the game and how it all ties together. So I will start with what I think is a really interesting question because I've never really considered it. Not that your other questions aren't good, but this one is from Colin Samir, and it's, how do we handle the social media dynamic of the race conversation? And what is the best way to have discourse online? And I think that is dramatically important right now because of the use of, my impression of social media was always like fun and happy. And now it's, you know, it can be a weapon, it can be this, it can be that. And so maybe Samir and Colin can give us their perspective and we can jump in since it's something you guys excel at greatly.
Yeah, sure. I thought this was really top of mind. You know, like when we ran the Lacrosse Network for probably, I mean, how many years? 7 years or so. And the racial conversation was so limited at that time. I remember feeling very, you know, excited and proud that we were like a racially diverse duo that was hosting content about lacrosse. And me specifically was not like an Indian guy from Los Angeles was just not your stereotypical, you know, lacrosse character. And so like when we would interact with very young kids, it made me feel really good that, hey, they're having exposure to all types of different people playing this sport. Recently though, the lacrosse conversation has become very charged online. And I think people like Paul, who's very open about his stances on, you know, human rights issues around equality, that has caused a lot of divide on social. And this weekend specifically, I saw there was a post from the Iroquois Nationals team that just said, you know, hey, we stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, based on the injustices that happen. And there were some pretty charged comments underneath that post, kind of, you know, in the opposite direction. And it was the first time ever that I decided to hop in and join the conversation. And try and like understand what was the best path, because it was going, you know, back and forth and extremely charged messages between young lacrosse players. And I was curious just to open up that conversation. You know, I approached it with recognizing that there needs to be an increase in empathy across the board within our community about the fact that there's going to be different viewpoints. But it's interesting to me that within lacrosse, there's so much hatred getting, you know, kind of thrown back and forth in the comments, especially because in a world where I felt very different in high school, there weren't very many Indian kids in my high school. Lacrosse was my way to feel connected to people. Like it was like there was a whole community of people who played lacrosse just like me, which is I think what drove me to start something online to be able to connect the community even further. And so to see it so disconnected in Instagram comments is something that I find really interesting. And I'm actually not positive what the best route is to, you know, have that conversation, and how do we set an example within our community of what discourse looks like, even if we have viewpoints that we disagree
on.
Anybody feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so as a graduate of Notre Dame, which is a big institution, one that represents what is very much a large white conservative, alumni base. If you go back the couple hundred years that Notre Dame has existed, it's been wild to see these people that have cheered for Black football players winning Heisman trophies and national championships the last 30 years, to see the response of the fan base to Notre Dame's institutional support of the Black Lives Matter movement, and really more specifically the athletic department. So you have this very white, conservative, Christian, Catholic base of your alumni and your donor support and then all the subway alumni that follow the school, that didn't go to the school but that cheer for them because they're the Fighting Irish, and it represents white Christian Catholic America. And to see the division within that institution's Instagram and Twitter feeds, it makes the stuff that Rabel and the PLL are doing almost like civil discourse. So it's very interesting to look at not just influencers within a small community like the niche lacrosse community, in which Rabel's a major influencer, but to see it outside of that, even major institutions with endowments bigger than small countries like your Harvards or your Notre Dames, and Duke just recently came out. I think what's more powerful than Rabel making the statements is what came out of Duke Lacrosse's Instagram and Twitter feeds with the picture of Danowski and the comments, because then that you create a discourse within an entire institution that has to go through some thorough legal counsel and thought. And these people aren't just willy-nilly slapping a Black Lives Matters post up. They're having conversations with the president of the institution's chief advisors and counsel to say, are we behind this? Should we be putting these messages out there? When you see them putting it out there, it's really thought-provoking. And of course, everybody's response from the other side is Marxist, this, that. Nobody's really doing and the thing is, there's not a lot of homework being done on either side. And I'll wrap up my point here because we got a lot of smart people on the call with lots to add. But I think there's the slacktivism component of it's sexy, it's topical, it's marketing. I want to stand for something and stand out, which a lot of people are doing in a very more just let me retweet something or make a post, and I'm not going to actually stand up and do real work. And I think the most powerful platform that exists right now are for filmmakers and people like yourselves, Samir, to actually tell real stories. Talk about the problem with empathy, but filmmakers and real journalists right now are the people that need to be seen and heard on social media, telling real stories, getting people to take their relational empathy levels from 3 to 10 through powerful storytelling and through the truth. Not, which is hard to find in journalism today.
If I could just speak, I on the advisory committee for University of Maryland, Lacrosse Alumni Advisory Committee to the University of Maryland, and like Kevin said, we've been having a bunch of discussion because and a lot of this has to do with the whipsnakes. A lot of them are former Terps, so you've got guys who. I think one thing that we're proud of at Maryland is the alumni. It's really a strong brotherhood. The people stay together. The older ones look out for the younger ones, and that connection stays. So we've got some, we're dealing with this because not everybody has the same view on it. So we've had a lot of conversations where in the process, we've been making some progress. I don't want to get ahead of where we are, but you've got guys who chose to wear BLM patches, guys who chose not to, guys who are alums who saw that, reacted to it. And now we're getting to the point where the exchanges in social media are now moving to phone conversations or group conversations and Zoom calls. And we're trying to, work toward something where we can all understand each other. It's not everybody's going to agree, but at least everyone can be heard. So it's been difficult, but I think we're going about it, at least for us, in the best way. Where a lot of people are involved, a lot of people care about the issue. It's just difficult bringing so many different voices together and being heard. So it's been tough, but I think we're working on it. And I want to say, just before I move, that picture behind me now that I switched to, if I move to the side, this is the 1971 Maryland lacrosse team. So I didn't want you to think I put up a picture of all white guys. Right in the middle there, behind my head, is the first black lacrosse player of Maryland, Lynn Spicer. So he's right in the middle of that picture. So I may kind of be to the side just so he gets, In 1971 was the first player in Maryland of color. So I'll sit like this for a while.
Curtis, that's incredible. Thank you for doing that, man. That's so awesome.
No problem.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think you nailed it in kind of response to Samir's question. Like, you know, social media conversations mostly are not positive, right? People get on there and they feel empowered because it's such an impersonal thing that you can just kind of say really mean and hateful things without having any real repercussions. And so I don't know if social media is necessarily the best place to have that conversation, but it's the place to start it. Like you said, Curtis, the conversation started on comments and in social media, but you moved it to Zoom calls and phone calls. And I think that's really where change can happen, because a conversation on Twitter, it's just going to go back and forth and it's going to devolve and not lead to anything positive. But if you can use it at least as a place to start and then move it offline and in person, I think when you can connect with people face to face and actually meet the other side, you can build a lot more empathy. Like you were saying, Samir, it's all about empathy. But I don't know if social media is actually the place where it's gonna, like a valuable conversation is not gonna happen. You're not gonna change anyone's mind in the Twitter feed or on a comment section on a post on Instagram. It's just not gonna happen. The one thing I think guys like you and Rabel and other really popular people on social media, especially in the lacrosse world, can do is lead by example. So when you're engaging in those conversations, if you're doing it in the most positive way, those young kids that follow you and like you and respect you are going to think twice before they post something gross and negative and disrespectful. It's the only way I think that social media can be used positively in that sense. I don't think it's a place to be actually having conversations. Unfortunately, it's just not the way social media really works in any sense, and specifically in the lacrosse world. I mean, if you look at some of the comments I posted on DeWan Miller's post, because he's been so outspoken with all of this stuff, and the negative comments he's getting, he's not going to change any of those people's minds with his Instagram story, but getting them face to face, which is something he's trying to do, I think might be a little different.
Yeah, I actually think one of the best parts about social media, as I've seen it in the past month, have been the fact that it increases access to some of the nuances of the conversation. Like if you look at Ty Warner's post, and specifically he's talking about the whip snakes and how some guys wouldn't wear the BLM patch. I thought one of the best parts of that post was speaking to the nuance of the difference between being not racist and actively anti-racist. And I think that idea may not change the mind of the person in the comments who's calling BLM a Marxist organization, but it may be increasing access to that even nuance to some kids who've never thought about it on their team, about
Definitely.
If they're like a white teammate, what that means, that potentially just being not racist, declaring yourself not racist, but holding in your beliefs is potentially harmful in a situation, as opposed to what it means to be actively anti-racist and to be like an ally. So I think just even access to that conversation is a net positive.
Oh yeah, I think that's very, very fair.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Javier, sorry. I just think Colin hit it on the head there with that, because and I've gained a lot of valuable knowledge just from having these conversations, but it's saying that you're not a racist and doing are two completely different things, especially today. And I'll tie this into social media in a second, but action is something that every guest has said. It's one thing to say I'm not racist and I post a black square and I do whatever, but taking real action. And it's not, I don't think anyone's asking, I know I'm not asking anybody I know in my circles to go out of their comfort zone, so to speak, but you can take action within your own circle of friends. And we all, and I think of it as like an onion, and the closer you are to that core, those people are closer to you, and then you go out and you have different friendships, and they may fall into this concept of the 20-60-20, where your 20% of your people you know are like solid family, you know, salt of the earth. Then there's 60% of the people that you know that are acquaintances, and they vary from different levels of friendship and things. And then there's 20% that you probably know that having these conversations probably won't work and it won't change them. And I butchered the concept. It's something Dr. Tina Opie introduced to me on one of these calls, but the idea stuck with me. And I believe on social media, one of the biggest things that troubles me is people's mixture of supporting and saying Black Lives Matter to those that would comment would say, I don't want to be political, or they're Marxists or something like that. And you're like, wait, let's start with, and when I say Black, I mean anybody of color, their life matters, period. I just had this conversation with someone I've known since I was 12. And instead of saying, and I tried to lead him down the street of like, the only answer would be, yeah, man, your life matters to me. You know, let's start there. But yet I got, that's a Marxist group. You need to, and I'm like, holy fuck. And so I replied to him twice, and then I just gave up because I was like, I just can't. He said, I want to debate you on this. I'm like, there's no debate. If you don't think my life is valuable, I can't, there's no debate. I'm not trying, this isn't a debate we're having today. I don't have people of all different backgrounds and colors and creeds and ethnicities on these Zoom calls to have a debate. It's a human rights issue, period. Now, Black Lives Matter, the organization, you need to study and read up on those three women that started it. They're very, very well-versed and very educated, and they have a political aspiration for that. That's fine, okay? You don't have to agree with people's politics, but you sure as hell should agree that their life matters, starting from there. You know, and I think that's what social media, to me, I get frustrated with, because the responses are so, as Trevor Tierney taught us again last week, the whataboutisms are ridiculous. You know, it's like me saying today's my birthday and Colin Samir putting out a video going, it's not Matt's birthday, it's he's a criminal or something. You know, it's so left field that these comments come out, instead of someone looking at it going, hey, here's someone I don't even know and I follow on social media, but they're saying another person's life matters. Okay. No, I can agree in a humanitarian level, or I can prove that I am not humanitarian and say I don't agree. But I didn't see what the Rabel's thing, but I mean, for some, all Black people are asking for today, as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned, excuse me, is people of color have done we've done this for years. We've been pointing this out. And white people are the ones that are wrestling with each other. You know, they really are. I don't want to speak up. I don't want to, it's like, all you're saying is someone's life matters. And if your friends want to attack you for that, I don't know, maybe you need to rethink those friendships.
Well, Matt, not to anyone, I apologize for being late.
Let me introduce
please.
Because you deserve this. Mike DeWan, late to the party, but he's born and raised in Poway, California, which is a suburb of San Diego. His dad got him playing catch in the backyard when Mike was focusing on baseball. So I call that a subtle hint to play lacrosse. He went on to play lacrosse at the University of California in Santa Barbara, where he graduated with an economics degree. Mike's what's known as a self-proclaimed lifer. He's coached, he's done all kinds of stuff. He's been a coach of mine, actually. We work together. But he continues as a fan and a proud Blacks dad right now, while he works as a professional at as a strategic key account manager for Medtronic. So welcome, Mike, and thank you for having your hard day to join us, but jump on in, sorry.
Hey, but I apologize. We had some cuts come through at work, and of course those things never occur at the beginning of the day. So I lost track of time. You know, with what Matt just said, one of the things we've studied at my work is unconscious bias. And that was a fascinating thing to study. And I think we talk about the same thing. It comes down to empathy. That's absolutely one thing. But they really went into the nuance of why we have stereotypes, right? And I think a lot of people, you make a distinction between stereotypes and being full-on racist, right? And stereotypes are a flight I came to learn that stereotypes are a fight or flight response. And we do them as shortcuts. We do them in ways that size somebody up real quick and make an assessment and whether or not we're gonna. But the problem is, right, is when those stereotypes become something serious. It's okay if you think white people can't dance, but if it becomes something more than that, then it's a problem. If you start applying all stereotypes to the macro, as opposed to it's applied to the micro. And so that, the thing with stereotypes and empathy and this kind of thing, it comes down to kind of a step further, where the thing with social media is causing to have a collateral effect on is everything now is becoming, there's no gray area, black and white, not black and white in terms of racist, but one side or the other. And it wasn't like that before. You'd have a movement or a difference of opinion, and that's how you learn from something. If I asked everyone what's the definition of insanity, probably most of us would say doing the same thing but expecting a different result. But if I ask everyone what's the definition of ignorance or stupidity, we're going to have a wide range of answers. But I would challenge that the definition of ignorance is a lack of diversified thought. And that's something I didn't realize when I was a young man, is growing up in Southern California, and my eyes have been open here since moving to Boston. But by having friends that are multicultural and of different creeds and different religions, you learn from their opinion, right? You learn from their background. One of the things, I was talking to a good friend of mine in North Carolina that lives in Atlanta, and one of the things I was saying to him, and Matt, forgive me, I might have said the same thing to you, but I don't know when equality came to mean that we're all the same. And I get nervous with that. I get nervous that the only way we can be equals is that if we're the exact same people. That erases history and everything else that's occurred. I don't know what it's like to walk a day in your shoes. And being your friend and learning from you, that's how I can come to understand those things. Equality means equal rights. We don't have to all be the same. That's what this life is about. Is thank God there is diversity and that kind of thing. But that's the thing that I just think is missing so much now, is the ability to talk to people, to learn, be like, you know what, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I see why you believe in it. As opposed to now where everybody is like, making separations, and you can only be with this person and that person, this person. I mean, that's not what love is about. I have friends where I don't believe in almost any of their pillars of what they believe in, except that they're a good person, and that's where we're friends. And that allows me to learn from that person and their lunacy, right? I wouldn't trust them with my kids. They're one of my best friends. But it's just, that's what life should be about. And it's really unfortunate. But I said this to Matt before, and forgive me for joining the conversation late. I'm going to get my time in. I'm still curious as to what made this situation, what sparked this kind of national response. Like, why all of a sudden is it people were that ignorant that until they saw someone, essentially a public lynching on TV, it took that to happen for somebody to be like, oh my God, the police are killing Black people. I mean, is that literally how ignorant some people are? That's I say that because I just, my fear is that, like Matt said, and obviously I can't empathize even a tenth of this. This has been going on since well before I walked this earth. And it will change, actual change come from this. And that's what I hope. You know, it's funny, when Obama left office and Trump got elected, he said something in the first tweet after, and he said something about progress is never usually 2 steps forward. I'm paraphrasing here. But he said something about progress is always going to be usually a step forward, 2 steps back, and then forward again. And I think about that a lot now, because we certainly are taking steps backwards. And I just hope I hope we get back on the right track. So anyway.
I actually think the point around empathy that I brought up, and I think we've talked about quite a bit now, I think the, you know, when I first thought about that point, it was around like empathizing with, you know, myself, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the Black community. And at the same time, I think that there is not as much space because it's so challenging for someone like me to empathize with someone who has the opposite viewpoint. It's like so hard for me to process what that thought process is and understand like what that thinking is, that I've been curious to actually hear someone out, so that like I could actually tap into the understanding of like, what is the other side of this? Truly, like I understand it through social. I read exchanges on social media. But like, it might be something that, considering in lacrosse, and Curtis, you brought this up about, you know, the whip snakes, which was a fascinating thing, that you have teammates with opposing viewpoints. Is there a world where, you know, we offer an opportunity for 2 people within our community to have a discourse, you know, on camera and really try and set an example of what, you know, discourse looks like? And I think like for me, when I saw Lyle take to social and Ty Warner take to social on both of their viewpoints, it's really, I thought, powerful to see the idols in our sport, you know, speak. And I think Rabel is so polarizing that it's challenging for him to speak. He's wrapped up in a lot of different things, but having Lyle and Ty Warner speak, I thought was really dynamic over the past month on their Instagrams. But is there a world where Ty Warner speaks with another member of the Whip Snakes, and rather than speaking about it, but they're speaking to each other as teammates? Because I think that's what's really important, is that when I see the exchanges happening within our community, within lacrosse, people aren't treating each other like we're part of the same community. But in the reality, it's like we're all part of the same lacrosse community. So how do we set an example of, you know, 2 people that our community look up to talking to each other? And then can that create an unconscious or subconscious situation where the next time you're in a discourse, you have some frame of reference of what it's supposed to look like to disagree with someone? Because a lot of times these comments on social are very selfish. It's like, let me get my point across to the other person on both sides. It's not actually like, wait, hold on, let me truly understand what's behind your comment and see where we can, where can we get to a point where we agree on something? And where can I recognize you and your viewpoints, and where can you recognize me and my viewpoints? And I think there's no example for that. It's just charged like dynamics that we see at the top of government. That's just like people slinging, you know, obscenities at each other, and it's just it's not what we want in our community. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think charged dynamics like take control of the entire narrative, especially on social media. Like in our experience, you can have 800 comments on a video that tell you it's the best video in the world, but the one that is the hate comment is right there at the top and has the most conversation on it. And that's the one comment that takes care of the whole narrative. So it's almost like, to Samir's point, I totally agree that there needs to be an effort to build a different type of narrative around just the culture of discourse. Yeah, I think that's
that was the stem of my question to you, Matt, is like, how can we create an example of what it looks like to talk about this? Because I don't think anyone knows. What is it like to talk about, what is it like for Ty Warner to talk to one of his teammates who he won a championship with, and they probably have an awesome friendship and great team dynamic, but he didn't wear a BLM patch? And what's it like for him to sit and talk about it with him?
Yeah, I agree. I would love to have, no offense to anybody here, I'd love to have more players that are current in that, and I've reached out to many of them. Some are doing things, have some things in the work. Many folks are just tired of talking about it, which happens. But I agree, you narrow it down to doing something like this, but just have 2 people. And you know, any way I can help you guys do that with your experience and your platform, I'm happy to, because like I said, so, and I'm not being selfish, I guess, just sitting, this is our 11th one of these, and I've learned a lot. And it's really helped me be a better supporter, even as a Black person, because I started saying we shouldn't have to do anything. And I still believe that high percentage of this is not really something I can do. I'm not the one benefiting from the inequality, you know? So I don't know what I could do, but I see that, to me, would be a fantastic use of social media. And not allow, I think you guys don't do it, but having no comments, just a raw 30, 45 minute conversation with nobody chiming in, and people well, they can, I guess, but hopefully people won't watch that and be like, let me comment, or is there a way to post it without comments? I don't know, because to me, it's like, we're not concerned about your comments. This is a comment. This is what needs to happen. This isn't, you know, I don't put these out. The comments I ask for, I want to know if you have other questions we can ask on this platform. Your opinion, like, you don't think it should be happening. Well, then, okay, then don't watch, you know?
I think just like how we watch game tape, you know, like we have to have some frame of reference of what this is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And right now, I don't have that.
I don't want to act like I can answer this question for everyone, but I mean, I think I can answer that question for you pretty easily as to why someone wouldn't wear a patch. And it's not, I don't want to speak, you know, for everybody, or for all white people, but, you know, but when this whole thing started with taking a knee, you know, a couple guys would put their hands on a Black guy's shoulder. And I couldn't believe somebody wouldn't just take a knee. And when the press came to him afterwards and said, why are you taking a knee? I'm taking a knee because my teammate is taking a knee. And I got to back that guy up first. And that just blows me. I still am just amazed that in all sports, somebody just, for nothing more than the bond of a teammate, this guy standing up for something, I have to back him up. When it comes to wearing a patch, it goes back to that, what you were talking about racism, being full-on racist, and so on and so forth. They don't want to wear that patch because they're not thinking of it in terms of Ty Warner as the person, as the teammate. They're not applying it to him. They're thinking about it on the grand thing of, well, this doesn't mean the same thing to me as it means to him, and this could mean anti-police, and I'm not anti-police necessarily, so I'm not. They're not applying it to Ty Warner's hurting, but my teammate is standing up for something. I'm gonna sit down, and I can tell you, I'm not a hypocrite. We've got 3 cops that live on my street. We've got one Black family around the corner, and we've got a couple Asian families in my neighborhood. I originally was going to put a Black Lives Matter thing on my yard, and then the day before I was going to put it up, my daughter got into a thing with one of the cops' daughters. It was all worked out, just little kids, this kind of thing. But I didn't put something up the next day because I didn't want it to become this huge thing. And so instead, I'm getting a sign that says, everybody versus racism. It's going to be pretty hard to get that one misconstrued. But my point is that that's why, is because something comes to mean different things to different people, and then they get wrapped up on it when on an individual basis, that's all that this is focused on. My friend is hurting. My teammate needs support. I'm there for you. That's all it should be about. But instead it becomes bigger than that and all this other, and then people don't want to get involved. I had a friend say the other day he's on the fence for voting because he's tired of all the riots.
Right.
And I haven't pointed out to him yet, imagine how tired the people are that are rioting. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But again, people can't think outside of what's how it applies to them.
Yeah, I agree, and I can understand what you just said, but I think the challenge is like the 13 to 15-year-old, even 18-year-old lacrosse kid doesn't get that context from the pros, nor do they know what it's like if their teammate wants to wear a BLM patch. They don't know how they're supposed to approach it if they feel uncomfortable and they would rather have a patch that says everybody versus racism. There's no playbook for how they're supposed to even talk about that, because what happened in the PLL all happened behind closed doors. We have no reference point of why someone didn't wear it, why they did, what the conversations were like in the locker room. All of that happened behind closed doors. So all of our, kind of the idols to the young kids in our sport weren't open about what they chose and why they chose it. And of course it's uncomfortable, but because we don't have a frame of reference, then everybody spins their own personal narrative into the pro that they like, and things become a lot more divisive and a lot more charged. And that's what I'm saying is I think that there's an opportunity for us to create a platform where teammates can talk like teammates, but have opposing viewpoints. Because I don't think teammates in lacrosse right now know how to have opposing viewpoints with each other.
Hey guys, just to touch upon, the power of media, social media. I work in sports and recreation for youth, for Indigenous communities. And, the biggest concern for us is youth mental wellness, right? Because I have a tough time getting my kid to leave his freaking Xbox. He's got an Xbox, he's got a virtual reality, he's got his phone, he's got his tablet, all on his side, right by the couch. And it's so easy to become a keyboard warrior and talk tough, right? And I don't want him to lose that interpersonal skills, right? So for us as coaches, as schools, as organized clubs, for me, part of what I do is help build leadership within coaches, right? So I had a discussion the other day with a coach about LGBTQ. And he's like, oh my God, you guys do that? I'm like, yeah, man, we definitely do. He's like, well, why are you guys doing that? I was like, well, you know what? It's becoming more and more a presence in our sports. Our coaches need the powers, the tools, the leadership to create that sustainability for our youth. The game will grow, our coaches need to grow, right? But I fear that the online presence is way too strong. And for us as an organization, when we represent our province, Team BC, there's certain guidelines that we have to adhere by, and certain standards we set our coaches to, right? And, sure that, there's not going to be everybody on the same page, but, but something that really stuck out, I'm not a basketball fan, but I do follow like the sports pages on my phone. And one highlight that really featured Kawhi Leonard. He was wearing a t-shirt that was in warm up. It says, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. Right. And I thought that was very powerful. And I thought that was very relevant to what's actually taking place today. And so how do we break down these social norms of being racist, and how do we build our coaches up to have the leadership skills to navigate these challenges, right? We have a coaching module that's tailored to strictly Indigenous coaches that work with Indigenous youth, right? It's partnered up with the National Coaches Certification Program. So you would receive professional development credits towards your coaching certifications. So if you're a coach that makes a living and you're required so many certifications a year or points, then taking some of these development courses would help towards your leadership and development. So for me, I think it kind of starts with, the parents, the power that they give the social media, and the access that they have, their kids allowing to be online for so many of these conversations, you know, and that fear of them not wanting to leave their online presence, right? So for me, I think it's a tough mental issue that we have facing online presence. So, you know, I think Kawhi Leonard's t-shirts really speaks volumes when it says all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So I really like that t-shirt, and I thought that really hit home.
Pete, can I ask you a question, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Did you, I think to what Samir was saying, and the point, Samir, you said it much more eloquently than I did, which can be expected. You were talking about a frame of reference. And what I was trying to express is there's not a frame of reference that applies. People think there's not a frame of reference that applies to everyone right now, right? Hopefully 20, 30 years from now, we all have a similar frame of reference, right? The majority has a similar frame of reference. But the problem is right now is not everybody has the same frame of reference. And you're right, that's what we need to get towards. But Pete, before you saw that t-shirt, did you think that's what Black Lives Matter meant?
No, I really thought Black Lives did matter, and that the focus should be helping our brothers, right? And I didn't need a t-shirt to tell me, but I just really struck home with that phrase, right? And for me, it's just like, how come people can't see the same way? You know, and to speak to, you know, what else is going on, and how the power of media could really switch the narrative. You know, we have our community, our Indigenous community. We started off with 9 cases the other day. Within a day, we had 10 more. So we had about 19 within 2 days. And our chairperson for our nation kind of spoke to said, yes, we are scared. And then so the next title of the newspaper article, it says Squamish Nation is scared. So they're changing the narrative how quickly within 1 day. And that's the power of social media, and that's the power of media. And that's what we as coaches, we have to try to decipher. How do we communicate to our kids?
Yeah, when you're trying to create a viral slogan, like you tend to try to keep it to 3 words, like Black Lives Matter, and then you have a lot of this counter movement against it is really just people taking the grammatical syntax and playing with it, right? And saying, which I think is the point Pete's making, why he really liked the t-shirt is, and there's been other examples of similar statements made where it's like, you know, nobody's saying that everybody else's life doesn't matter. You know what I mean? People are taking grammatical syntax and just trying to create a counter message of like, oh, that's a selfish thing to say because everybody's life matters. You know, I mean, that's just, it's the nuance of the ignorant, like, you know, rebuttal that's going to try to, you know, be like, oh, no, you know, blue lives matter too. And white, everybody's like, yeah, everybody knows shit, man. Everybody knows that. And nobody's not saying that. You know what I mean? But you know, you need to come up with 3 words to get their message across. And Black Lives Matter was a pretty easy 3 words to do it. And it's not diminishing anybody's else's human potential and worth, you know, but that's almost like the silly, that's the distraction. It's like the distraction that the ultra, you know, no offense for the people that are against the people that have created this, that's their distraction. Let's turn the conversation away from the conversation of Black Lives Matter and make it into, well, everything, you know, how can you say such a thing, you know? But it's just taking the, you know, grammatical syntax of the slogan that had to be created and twisting it.
I think it's a good point. We're going to move on. But I love everyone's feedback. And I think what Samir and Colin are getting at is in their wheelhouse, which would be awesome to see that, you know, we're all older and not playing current. Well, we're all older. And I think Samir's point was like, what can he do in his professional job to better the thing? And I think that's a great idea. And I'll definitely help you guys as much as I can. Just get 2 people to really sit down and talk, and then use that as an example of this is something you can do at age 14, 15, 16, those formidable years, This is something two coaches could do that are one's black, one's white. You know, I think that's a great idea. Let me move on here. So with lacrosse and racism and the lack of diversity and so forth, increasing participation of Black and people of color at the youth level will eventually lead to more Black and players of color, coaches, administrators, etc. That's the long-term game. The question is, what's the short-term game? And I will leave that up to you guys to provide feedback.
Yeah, so that was actually my question, I think, Matt, if I'm remembering correctly my email. And I think ideally, in order for lacrosse to be less racist, it needs to be more diverse, because the biggest driving factor, I think, at least in my opinion, to people being racist is that they're not exposed to different cultures and different communities. And that's, I think, so true for the lacrosse community. Like if you look at the prep schools, there's one Black kid on a prep school team, and there's like 2 kids of color on any high school team. And in order for that to change, we need to have more youth and more kids playing. But there's not a lot of that at the top level, right? So how do we get more coaches to play or to coach? How do we get more Black coaches, more Latino coaches? Where do we get those people from? Like, I don't know. In order for kids to play, they want to see people like them. But if there's not players, it's kind of like a, chicken and the egg kind of thing. I really don't know the answer.
I don't know the exact answer, but I will say that just having them on this show, Bridge Lacrosse, Harlem Lacrosse, the Oakland Club, the Detroit United Club are doing great things and have good examples of, and I'll say Harlem probably and Bridge because I think they've been around longer, but they have really solid examples of bringing the kids back that have been in the program and having them coach to that exact point, Javier, because that's extremely important. And it's great to do it as an internal mechanism. I know in my hometown where I grew up, you went, at that time, it's all club at the youth level, and the high school was still technically a club, but you were in that program for those 4 or 5, 6 years sometimes. And it was understood that like when you were home, you were to come back and help. And they've taken that model and using it even in their inner city programs and so forth. And it's working. We've had a couple of guests on this show that are players currently, and they're Black and players of color. And they said when they go over to their local rec program just to help coach for a day or so, the one gal said these little girls come up to her, they're Black little girls, and she's Black, and they're like, oh my God, you play in college? And it's such a far-fetched idea for them, and she knows the importance of it. But there are, people have lives, and these few players of color out there are probably, I'm guessing, pretty heavily saddled with so much, and they can't just be the only ones out there. So yeah, it's an interesting question, because the short game is, let's focus on making it a welcome sport. And last week having Steve Stenerson on, and Lars Tiffany and Jim Stagnita and folks of that nature that are in leadership roles that recognize and openly say, yes, the sport it will benefit greatly, and so forth and so on. I think that's going to get us there. Which brings me kind of to the next point is, do you think it's necessary for lacrosse organizations or programs to take a public stance on social issues? And I find that's an interesting question, because we do have a variety of panel here, and Curtis started off by explaining what's happening at Maryland. And somebody, I think, mentioned was it Duke that's doing something? Somebody mentioned that they had a statement. So I pose that to you guys. How do you feel about organizations, program, club, these traveling club groups? Kevin, that's your wheelhouse. Thoughts?
Matt, Matt, before we move on to that question, can we go back to the one you just asked before about like the cultural aspect of things? If you don't mind me asking, you and Curtis, when you guys started playing, how much of it was a cultural thing? Like, how much blowback did you get from your black friends, like for playing a white sport? Because I think that is, part of it is because absolutely you don't see people of color, and then so why am I going to be the first man on the moon, so to speak? So, from where you grow up, and obviously I know a little bit about it, but was it because you saw a couple guys playing at Syracuse, so it was like, I'm going to give this a try, or what was it for you that made you decide, like, I'm going to do this instead of this other thing? And then what was, in your own culture, what was the reaction?
Yeah, my answer to that, I'm older than you guys. So it's complicated and at the same time kind of boring. So I went to St. Paul's, which when I gave my little bio to Matt, I told him, in case any of y'all are confused, St. Paul's is the best lacrosse school in the history of the game. It can't be argued. We produce more college All-Americans than any school. I'll just leave it at that. Just trust me. So anyway, I started there in the 4th grade, and at St. Paul's in the spring, it's a small private school. In the spring, you either play lacrosse or you play tennis. So everybody played lacrosse. So going to where I went to school, I never played lacrosse before, but everybody played lacrosse. So I didn't have a choice. If you go out of that, I didn't grow up in the neighborhood where most of the kids came from. It was probably a 25-minute ride for me to get to St. Paul's from the black neighborhood I grew up in. And I was a baseball player first. So even when I was playing lacrosse, even as I progressed and I got good at it, and I was playing in high school, I was still playing baseball. They didn't have baseball at St. Paul, so I played in the club teams in baseball through I stopped when I was 15. But actually, I was good enough in baseball that I was scouted, and the scout told me, you need to pick between baseball and lacrosse because the throwing motion for lacrosse is going to ruin your arm for throwing baseball. And at the same time, my high school coach is telling me, you can get a scholarship to college. So going back to my neighborhood, nobody knew what lacrosse was. But they knew of lacrosse, but they didn't play it. So they were kind of, as long as I was playing baseball, it wasn't an issue. It was kind of a novelty to them. So they were, oh, you play lacrosse? Yeah, we saw that. And then ended up my next door neighbor, who's about 5 years older than me. He went on to, you've ever heard of the 10 Bears at Morgan? He wasn't one of the 10 Bears. He actually came right after them, and he's probably the best player to ever play at Morgan. He led the nation in scoring one year. His name's Joe Folks. I introduced him to lacrosse. I came home with my lacrosse stick. He saw it, and he says, and your sister has one, so I ended up with my sister's girl stick, and he had, my stick. We started playing catch, and he went on to, he became a college All-American. But so my neighborhood, it wasn't a problem. So that part is kind of boring. But at St. Paul's, I was, as far as I know, again, St. Paul's plays in the top. We consider the top conference in high school lacrosse, and I'm pretty sure I was the first black player to play in that conference. But it was genteel enough that while nobody outwardly, said anything, but I remember being on the sidelines, and you could hear parents, yelling to players or fans yelling to players. And I remember one time we were playing our arch rival, and I was playing against a guy who ended up being my teammate at Maryland, and he was probably the top player in high schools that year. And they're saying, "Oh, take that guy," like he's black, he's probably no good. And I could hear, I was close enough to the sideline to hear somebody saying, that's Curtis Rountree. He's really good. He's playing kind, and so I kind of like, I did something, and I kind of looked over at the guy. He ended up being somebody I know now, the father of a player. But he came over after the game and shook my hand. So there was some of that. But as far as, like I said, mine was boring as far as I think your question. But it did have to deal with some of that. But the reaction or what might be question the black kid out there on the lacrosse team, it was in the thing where it was more whispered. There was nothing overt. Never called names while I was playing, but always had the sense that I wasn't just one of the guys out there. Within my team I was, but within this league it was you could tell they kind of looked at me like I think they were kind of maybe a little afraid that who's this black guy playing lacrosse, and I played defense, and I think it might have helped me that some guys I had an advantage because they didn't know what I would do with this lacrosse stick, so they sometimes kept their distance.
I'll say that I've said this before on the show. I started playing in 7th grade and was given a stick by my older brother, who actually worked for Brian Lacrosse when he was at Boston College. And my town being a lacrosse town, I think everyone knew about it. The kids on my street knew about the game, just not a lot of people played. For me, it was the historical value of the game because they were very good about, teaching us the basics that it's from the Native Americans, and I looked at that, quite frankly, as, wow, this sport's closer to me than most white people. Not that that was like a conscious thought, but that's the way I looked at it. I was like, oh, cool, I have a great, I think it's great grandmother, I think it is, that's a Native American. So I jumped in, and it never, there was 2 or 3 black players on our team. 2 of us, I remember, were starters. So, and that was right in 7th and 8th grade. So it wasn't, maybe people said things. I didn't hear it at that young of age. I don't think I heard the N-word until, I think one of my high school buddies said the player called it. I didn't hear it, but they were the defenseman. I was a midi, and they punished the kid for me, which I thought was hilarious. These are white guys. But that goes to your point of being on a team. Why wouldn't your teammates stick up with you? They did. And they didn't tell me this till years later. We were in our 30s when they told me. So, yeah, I find it, I didn't have, and again, it is a long time ago. I'm only a couple years younger than you, Curtis, actually, but yeah, it wasn't something to where I had to go home and explain anything on my street, on the block I lived on. In fact, we had enough sticks around our house that because of my older brother and then 2 older brothers knew how to play, and then 1 older brother played in high school, we'd have them out in the street and people would want to try it out. So it wasn't, it was totally different. And it's just the environment you live in. And I wasn't in an inner city. Summit's not an inner city, it's a suburb. So it was welcoming. So let's go back to the organizations and making public statements. And then we're going to jump onto one more before we run out of time here. But and I ask you, Kevin, because you're an organization manager.
Yeah.
You had a situation, as you know, you and I spoke about, and I think you guys handled it quite well and quickly. But
yeah, we had a sit. Yeah, I'll just give everybody the quick background on it. So I'm the club director in Florida for a big national company called Sweetlax, and never really thought that I would end up in club lacrosse. It's certainly not something that I felt would really jive very well with some of the soulful work and things that I've tried to get involved with lacrosse, and I've always kind of looked at club lacrosse as sort of the people that have monetized lacrosse better than anybody else in a small business capacity. So I never really thought I'd be doing this, but there is a need certainly in some areas and in Florida for kids to have a bridge and a platform to the opportunities to play in college and to have their talents recognized around the country. And we've got a real successful program here in Florida that captures the best kids from around the state, but we also have these regional programs that are sort of more like affiliates. And it was about, I guess, it was late July, so about a month ago, a little over a month ago, there was a team from the Space Coast area of Florida, and there was one of our regional programs. There was an interaction in a game in Orlando where a high school student, used the N-word towards a black player from another area around the state, and it became it was we did an investigation on it, and it was honestly a perfect case study of issues that in the past have been probably swept under the rug a lot, and instances where members of the black members of the lacrosse community were made to feel extremely uncomfortable, and not like it was a game that was welcoming to them. And for us, we kind of very quickly, I think with some humble self-awareness, realized we need to seek counsel on how to handle this better. And honestly, a lot of that was led by these the three black boys on the other team that have been victimized, and their conversations with folks like Kyle Harrison and ultimately Gus Henningberg of the Black Lacrosse Alliance, and then we just kind of listened to them and learned from them, and they told their stories and helped counsel us on a reaction and a response to the situation. And I think that was an incredible learning experience for all of us. And I think that there are, we're trying to work with US Lacrosse right now, and these three boys have been pretty inspiring in terms of their vision and their action and their ability to to tell their stories, and then really through this platform of the Black Lacrosse Alliance, they now have a platform and a voice where this would have been swept under the rug. We want to talk about the power of social media. So this situation happens on a Sunday. This Black lacrosse player from outside Tampa sends Kyle Harrison a private message on Sunday night. Monday morning, Kyle Harrison tweets out the situation and what happened. We hadn't even really been fully alerted to exactly what happened. I'm up in New Jersey with a national, level team coaching at not New Jersey, I was in Delaware, like a National Lacrosse Federation event, and then had other staff was there at this local regional event when this happened. I'm driving from like Delaware back to Florida, hear about it Sunday night, reach out to a couple people, and then Monday morning, Kyle Harrison blows it up, and everybody's talking about it. And we have Gus Henningberg reaching out to us saying, "Hey, we know you don't know what the hell you're doing here. Let's get on a Zoom with these kids in another day or two, and let's talk it out and figure it out." And then we were just able to get some good counsel and some guidance. But if these boys didn't have a platform and somebody to go to, and what we're trying to kind of do with the Black Lacrosse Alliance is create almost like I want to say a hotline or a whistleblower situation, but a way to report incidents, and then put the powers of reaching out and figuring it out in the hands of, they're having big brothers like, and Gus Henningberg kind of serving like that to a lot of the pro Black lacrosse players. Obviously, Kyle Harrison came to the rescue and really helped bring this out into the public in this situation. We can't do that for every kid all over the country, but if they can create a process where it just starts to nip things in the bud real quickly. And honestly, I don't want to ramble here, but the response, and this came through a lot of conversations and thought, was the boys, not just the team of the boy that said this, but which was a high school team, but the U14, the U12, and the U10 teams, they all had their events canceled that weekend, the upcoming weekend. And so we got pushed back, and and it seemed like it seems extreme to a lot of people because there's 10-year-old kids that weren't able to play in a tournament now, right? But it was like it forces their parents and them to have very difficult conversations of why aren't we playing in this tournament? We didn't do anything wrong. We're not racist. We didn't do anything wrong. But they, it's like, that forces an uncomfortable conversation between parents. Well, there was a boy on the high school team that called a boy a bad word. What word did he say, Mom? Like what? Well, it was a really bad word about somebody else. And well, what, is it one that Dad says, like when he's yelling it, like, so he's like, it was a really bad one that you maybe, and having to have that conversation and it's really uncomfortable for everybody. We got tons of backlash from that club and those families but we've since severed ties with the leadership of that group because they went into more of a defensive mode of, well, they were taunted into saying this. Rather than just own it, it became a little bit more too much like trying to create smoke and noise to distract and to justify why it got said, or how they were baited into saying it or something. But it forced a lot of conversations, and we were really grateful to all the time that the Black Lacrosse Alliance spent, talking with us about it, and grateful that the only thing we did right in the situation was have the humble self-awareness to listen to them. They kind of helped us think through it, but I think that's what more people need to have is, I think the ability to step out, to be humble and self-aware and reflective, and to, put ourselves in the shoes of these boys that grew up in Florida in these uncomfortable situations, season in and season out, and you come away with a totally different perspective. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes that come from that with US Lacrosse and the Black Lacrosse Alliance. The same way like music concerts in the past have had like 1% for the planet, or have had like a sustainable plastic free music things where you bring the water, your Nalgene bottle or whatever, your Yeti, and you can fill it up at a water tank, so there's no there's probably going to become like a zero tolerance club lacrosse tournament alliance, and there'll be signage and branding made up, and it's like zero tolerance. If an official hears anybody say anything or a coach, it's just going to be, you're done. You're kicked out of that tournament. And so there's a lot of conversations being started on just how to harness institutional strength and power in the lacrosse world on things like that.
I think that's extremely important. Having run plenty of events through this foundation, I've always taken a zero tolerance, and maybe just because I'm a Black man, but I don't see a reason for it. I don't see a reason why I should have any kind of second chance at that point, because the lesson's not going to get learned most likely. So I've always done, for fighting and anything of that nature, I get the coaches understand, because I say it to them 4, 5, 6 times before the event. And I actually give them the phrases. I'm like, you need to make sure you're telling your players, if this happens, the entire team is done. And in the 2 years out of 11 years of doing this event, 2 times it's happened. Both times the coaches, before I even got to the field, as the referees called me over, the coach said, "We're done, aren't we, Matt?" And I was like, "Yes, but let me see what happened here." Because I wasn't going to go back on that. I just wanted to find out the facts. And if I need to speak to them further, or if a parent, because you always, like you said, Kevin, you get parents that want to say this or that, and you get defensive, and it's like, look at your registration. It clearly says, you will lose. And that, I've always subscribed to that, because that's how I was disciplined in the game. The only thing I can take away from you is your ability to play. And we as leaders need to use that more, because it's really the only thing we can take away, and then teach them afterwards. I just don't agree with well, I'll teach them and then I'll bring them back tomorrow. No, just take it away, make it hurt, and then you can move on.
We did that.
Be a good leader.
We did that our first year at San Diego State. Remember, with the captains, and yeah.
So
I think the big point from all this that I'm getting both from what you said, Matt, and what from you said, Kevin, is that I personally, like, if an organization wants to make a statement and put out a statement, I think that's fine. If they don't want to put out a statement, I think they have every right to do so. But the important part of it is that they're not just putting out a statement to put out a statement and be performative, but that there's actually being action taken behind it. Because I could easily post something on Instagram that says Lacrosse Nations is all in support of Black Lives Matter, but if I'm not doing anything to hire more Black staff or add Black and brown people of color to my board of directors or to bring in more volunteers of different races, then what does it matter that I'm posting something on Instagram, right? Kevin, you guys could have put out a statement that said, we're disappointed in what happened. We stand with Black Lives. See you later, and then not done anything about it. But the fact that you guys didn't let any of your teams play because of it, like, that shows people that you're actually, like, I think that says more than just putting out a statement. And that's probably the most important thing in all of this, right? Like, we can say so much, but if none of us are doing anything, then it's useless.
If I can just say, that was my question, and Javier, all you guys get, but Javier, that's, I think, what I was going to, because at the beginning I told you I'm working with Maryland, and we are working toward, there will be a statement, but there will be action behind it. But at the same time, we're kind of looking at, some of, what's coming from other places. What are they doing? What are they saying? And, how do you judge their silence? But it is about just the genesis for Maryland was this PLL and the whip snakes thing. And I'm not going to speak for anybody here. I do know a little bit about some of the behind the scenes stuff, but there was an issue with some of the people involved that was this, were people doing this just to do it. And, were they genuine? Were they really, put their money where their mouth is, or, do action behind some of this? So that's caused some of the friction within what we're doing. So while we're trying to take action, and I say we, and I'm comfortable enough to say I'm speaking for Maryland Cross because I am involved in this process. We are trying to do something, and we're taking action, and we're hoping, to try to, see that happen at all levels. Not, and it's great to hear, Kevin, what you did, and Matt, your experience. That's the kind of thing, because I also referee lacrosse, and I've refereed some of these club tournaments, and I've had, we all know the stories of the parents who get out of hand. And I refereed once, and I told a parent, you're done. You're thrown out for this game. You can go in the parking lot, do whatever else. He goes to the tournament director. It was something he said that was totally out of line, along those lines. At the end of the game, or before the game ended, that parent was, he wasn't back on the sideline, but he was where I could see him. And the tournament director told him he could come back, and immediately after the game, the tournament director comes up to me, and he was probably new to doing this, but he said, basically, I was just trying to, he was wrong in what he did, but they came a long way, and they played money, and I just, maybe we can, he acknowledges what he did wrong, so can we just put this behind us? And then, like, you just open the door for this to continue. You just set it up that the parent who sees him back, or the player who sees him back, or the coach who sees him back, nothing's going to change. So I appreciate that you guys did do something in those situations.
Yeah. Got to unmute myself. Yeah, that's, as soon as you come back, it's on. We're running short on time. I know Samir and Colin had to go. They have another business call to take. And I know, Mike DeWan, you have to go. It's late for you. Let me then just jump ahead really quickly. Like I said, you guys had really good questions. And I like Pete's to end on his if we can, and maybe give short answers. And then I'm going to ask you each to just give a quick, quick sign off note or say one last thing. But Pete's statement was really good. In our opinion, what can be done to be more inclusive of the creators of the game, which I think is something that's come up a lot in each episode as we've done these, and I've gotten more comfortable moderating them, is the general consensus of teaching the history of the game needs to be included much more than it is, because we all felt that would help to give, I think it helps any coach to give a platform to then take it to that conversation if need be, depending on the age group, because you're going to temper these for your age groups. But even when speaking with Lars Tiffany and Steve Sanderson and Jim Stagnita last week, there was a big agreement on the education piece of the history of the game, which, because you've seen it this summer, you have people saying the most outrageous things. You're like, the game is from these people. It's their gift from their creator that they're sharing with us. It is not a lily white sport. It's not Lily White didn't create it, okay? So let's take a step back. Let's learn the history. Let's really, for the young people coming through, I think history is most important. But I'm interested in a quick response from each of you, because I agree with Pete. I mean, there needs to be ways to do this. I was fortunate enough to have him bring a Shapeshifters team down to San Diego. And I thought that was a really cool experience for our whole event, just having the guys there. And they loved being out of British Columbia and coming to San Diego too in March. But I thought, I always looked at it that way, and I'm curious to see what others think.
Yeah, I'll start off if everybody doesn't mind. I think that this game is something that's probably brought us all incredible joy, right? And I think that we were created to take the things that we love and are most passionate about and that bring us the most joy, and then to go and take and share those things. I think that's the human being truly alive, right? Is when we're creating off of that joy around the things that we're most passionate about. And for most of us here on the call, like that, one of those things is the creator's game in lacrosse. And the history and the roots of the game, I think, are something that need to be like in the first paragraph of sharing and introducing the sport to wherever you are. Like, this is the game of lacrosse. This is the story, because the story of it is one of incredible history and is that just, to put it simply, absolutely, beautiful and fascinating. And I in sharing the game in East Africa and in Jamaica, areas where, as a white person going and that have been heavily colonized and suffered greatly at the hands of the divide and rule concepts of British colonial colonialization of both of those regions of the world. That enabled me to connect with people right away, and kind of fascinated people with the history of the game, to be talking to the indigenous Black Ugandan tribe people. They've all got their tribal connections very, very strongly still. That a lot of tribalism as Africa becomes more progressive and a little bit more liberal in terms of the social dynamics of these countries. Tribalism, it becomes less and less a dividing factor, and it becomes a more and more a rich historical heritage component of their history and their ancestry of their families. But being able to explain to them the history and the roots of the game is something that they all resonate with. That this isn't the white guy from America coming to bring some white British colonial sport. They all get fascinated when they hear the history of the game, and I think trust the game a little bit more in a sincere and authentic way when they hear that, and they get really excited to hear that. It's got so much more of a rich history than, say, the game of basketball being created in Springfield, Massachusetts by a gym teacher just nailing peach baskets to a wall. No disrespect to the roots of the game of basketball, but the roots of the game of lacrosse are just so much more rich in the history and the significance of the game. And I'll just make one last point that, and I'm sure everybody, it's a great question to end on. But in Jamaica, we called the high school championship the Taino Cup. The Taino people are the ancestors of the Arawak Indians that first settled in Jamaica, that were largely killed off by diseases brought by Christopher Columbus. And there's very few Tainos left, and there's a lot in Puerto Rico, actually. They kind of inhabited all of those Caribbean islands. The Tainos is the boys championship, and then the girls championship, we called it the Maroon Cup, which is the escaped black slaves that went off to live in the mountainous interior of Jamaica, were called the Maroons. So the girls, and there was a famous Maroon called Nanny, who was like the leader of this community, the biggest community of escaped black slaves. So we call it like the Maroon Cup was the girls, named in honor of this woman Nanny, who was the leader of the escaped black slaves, and the Taino Cup was named basically after the indigenous people of Jamaica. So trying to go in our first championship in Uganda, we called it the Kabaka's Cup, who is like the tribal king of the area, and trying to kind of, I think, as the game grows around the world, even the ability to tell the stories for the lacrosse pioneers, and Javier is doing obviously an incredible job in certain areas, but there's people all over that are taking and sharing the game. Is how do you almost share the game internationally and use as a platform to celebrate indigenous people's rights, or to name parts of the game or the institution that gets built up, the championships, around indigenous, who are the indigenous people of that area. And so that's been a fun way to build like the traditions of Jamaica lacrosse, and and it resonates with people in Jamaica, even the black, largely, people stolen from Africa, they resonate with that, knowing that it's an indigenous game. And the Rastafarians that I've talked to, people in the Marley, when they hear the roots of it, they become even more interested in the game. So that's, I think, one, some ways, just through my personal experience, that I think can be kind of replicated in different areas, especially as it grows around the world. Because a lot of the people that lead these companies around the countries, these emerging countries, they're the colonial kings. They're not the people that, that actually were the indigenous people. So how does lacrosse become almost associated and connected with indigenous people's rights as it grows around the world, and then honoring them as it grows in these different respective countries?
Yeah, I think that's solid, Matt, Kevin. I think in order to be more inclusive, one of the things that we at Lacrosse Nations try to do is expose the U.S. lacrosse community to the world outside their bubble. As we all know, the lacrosse community is very white, very affluent, and they are stuck in a bubble, right? They don't really leave their towns or their neighborhoods or their communities all that often, so they're not exposed to different communities and different cultures. And that is what leads to a lot of our biases and racism in general, right? So I think one thing that high school and college and club teams can be doing now is looking and reaching out to the indigenous community to play, right? Like if you're in New York, there's so many schools that you can play against from the reservations, right? Go out and seek them out and try to play them. I was able to, last November, I was coaching the Colombian women's team, and I got to sit down and speak with one of the directors of the Haudenosaunee women's national team. And I got to learn so much about like just all the different challenges that they face as an international, as a nation that's not recognized by any other country as a nation, and just participating in these tournaments is so incredibly hard for them. And it's challenges that no other emerging nation in lacrosse faces. And I think just getting exposure and talking to them and learning more about what they are going through, because their situation as just a lacrosse entity is so much different than any other country or team or club that is playing lacrosse right now. And it's crazy because they're the ones that created this sport, and they have a hard time playing in an international tournament because they can't get a visa because they're not recognized as a country. I think just, getting high school kids and college kids to interact and be exposed to that is just the biggest way that we can start including more people. And instead of us waiting for them to come to us, we should be going to them.
I think that's it right there. We should be going to them. That really sums it up. And I agree, having, and knock on wood, hopefully be able to get back to it. But when you travel, you really, if you still are having hesitations once you travel outside of the comfort zone, and like Kevin said, going to a Jamaica or Africa as a white guy, you're not only in the minority, you're like, it's like that percentage of the people. And so then you're looked at, and then you realize, wow, people are staring at me, and you realize this, and you realize that. And I should say, I hope a person realizes all the different nuances that and slights that they may do in their life. Somebody speaks a different dialect or language, and you give that puzzled look when you're in a deli or a coffee shop. It's like all that, we've seen it all. Like, you just become, for me, I'm like, whatever, when I was married, my wife she's white, and she used to want to have pronouns here and there. And I'd be like, I didn't notice anything. She's like, how could you not notice? I'm like, well, I unfortunately, I've become numb to it, but she would notice, and to her credit, I always thanked her for that. But, so, yeah, all good points. And I think where we're at now, there's never a good time to end these things, but I've taken a lot of your time, you guys. So I appreciate it. So, and you're all invited back. Please come back anytime you want. If you have referrals, get them to come on with you, or instead of you, whatever you choose. But I think this conversation is necessarily critically needed. Samir sent me a quick text. They had another business call to jump on, so I couldn't even give him time to, he came right up to the last second where he had to log off, but he thanks all you guys. And I told him I'd work with him on that idea, because I think this is a good platform. There is B. Laxer's blog does a good thing where he does one-on-ones. I just saw one yesterday. Why am I drawing a blank? Oh, Pat Young is doing a thing through Nations United with a partnership through there and having conversations. So they're happening slowly, and in Joby Nation, Joby does his thing. And as someone said early on, there's so many lanes to the destination that I think we as leaders and people, obviously if you're on this call, you're concerned about it, we should encourage people to jump in one of those lanes or create their own, because we're all getting to the same spot. And I've learned that because my comfort level with certain things is I prefer, like this, I've gotten really used to doing these, and I look forward to them. But I may not want to do X, Y, and Z. Curtis is heavily involved with the alumni group and helping steer that conversation. That's his lane. Javier is doing his thing with the Panama group, and Mike's being a supportive guy and concerned about his future of his children. There's just so many lanes. So I think recognizing that. So I'd like each of you just to go around. I'll go around and we'll start with Pete. If you just give us a closing remark as we wrap up, we'll end it there after everyone's had a time to say something.
Awesome. Thanks for the feedback, guys. Totally appreciate being a part of the conversation today. And what better way to change the game that we love than through like-minded people? And if you don't know, ask somebody. Somebody will help you, right? And about the inclusion, You know, for me, working with the Olympics, you know, it was right here in my back territory in Vancouver, Canada. And as an Olympic partner, we had, you know, worked with the Vancouver Organizing Committee, the IOC, and, you know, representing Squamish Nation. You know, the best ways that, you know, they could include us was asking questions. How can we include you guys? You know, and with these tournaments, you know, taking place in New York, you know, Seneca Nation's right there, you know, you could have them do a welcome of the tournament. You know, have an elder come and bless the creators game for that tournament. You know, it takes place all over the place, and I'm sure there's traditional territories, there's First Nations, there's Native Americans, you know, that are in the territory. And you know what, man, it, like Matt says, just ask us, you know, and would love to share our knowledge, share our culture, and be recognized and have that opportunity to let people know we're still here and that this is our game and that we want to share it. And what better way than through the brotherhood of lacrosse. So, you know, I really thank Matt for including me in today's conversation. You know, I really look forward to hearing more from the conversations that take place today, you know, and, you know, maybe our paths will cross sometime down the road once, you know, the border is open and we're able to do love internationally again. So once again, stay safe, keep well, all the best to everybody's families.
Thanks, Pete.
Language.
Oh, say that again. Wait, say that again.
Hojka.
What-
Hojka.
What's that mean?
It means thank you.
Oiska.
Hojka.
Oiska.
Hojka.
But you did the hand signal.
So that means my hands are up to you, and that means I thank you, and I show gratitude for everybody's time today.
See, we learn, and that's something you can use, you know. Mike, I know you've got to get going, so go ahead. And a short one, Mike. Short one.
Yeah, I know. I will be succinct for the first time in my life. No, I really think you know, it's been something, you know, like you and I talked about. It's just, I think it's gotten crazy. But, you know, the two things I'll just end on real quick is this isn't hard. Don't be an asshole to people. It's not hard. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, kind of like causal aspects of things. We do have a diversity problem in this sport. We still have a population problem in this sport. We need to grow the game still. So to the people out there who are playing, to all of us that are trying to grab that person and pull them in and stuff, don't just grab somebody who looks like you. Grab somebody else. It changed my life when someone put a stick in my hands, and you know, I just hope that continues. And you know, what I don't hope is that this conversation continues, as I started off saying. So Matt, I appreciate it. I love you, and thanks for including me.
Good to be here. Curtis, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say, just like everyone else, thanks, Matt, for including me, and it was great to hear, you know, everyone's opinion on these things, these issues. This is the only way, you know, like we talked about earlier. There's problems that lacking diversity in lacrosse. There's problems social media has caused in lacrosse, but it's going to be conversations like this that gets, you know, gets things moving toward a solution. And again, like we said earlier, it's what I've been saying to people, and a lot of the young alums who are, we've had issues with, you know, like I said before, guys who are in the tight bubble of their teammates, and they, you know, they thought these guys were like brothers and they were all of like mind, and now they, you know, moved out a little, and all of a sudden there's these different opinions, and it's really torn up some of these guys, and you know, it made some friendships, you know, maybe in question. But being a little older, you know, my thing is that, like we said, things are not great now, and I honestly expect them to get worse, but they got to get worse to get better. And it's you know, we got to have these conversations. So the, you know, the idea of taking steps forward, taking steps back, you know, that's where we are, and it may get worse, but we got to go through that. We got to go through that pain, that struggle for things to get better. And I think these conversations, Matt, again, thank you. Oshka? Did I get it right? Thank you for including me, and thanks for all of you guys doing what you can to move the conversations forward.
Yeah, beautiful. Javier, did you get it? No.
Yeah, like everyone else said, thank you, Matt, for organizing this. This was awesome. I'm really glad to be a part of it. You know, the only thing I'll add to this is that the only way that the lacrosse community gets through this and makes change is by doing it as a community, as a group. So it takes the pro guys and the college coaches and the individual clubs and all the organizers. And it's not just one organization that's going to change everything, but it's all the organizations collaborating and working together and having conversations like this, and then putting, you know, plans into action. Because without it, all the conversations in the world don't mean anything. So if everyone can do their part, but we can do it collaboratively, then we're going to move in the right direction a lot faster. Pete, thank you for teaching us that, by the way. That was something, I think that was the highlight of the call for me.
Ochka. No, Ochka.
Yeah.
Ochka. Say it again. Oi.
Ka.
Oh, oi.
Ojka. Ka.
Ka.
Ojka.
Kevin.
Oh,
Ojka.
this has been a great call. Thank you for pulling me in. As I said earlier, Matt, it's been awesome to make some new friends and see some old faces that I haven't seen in a long time. And yeah, there's a quote that, you know, Javier and I both led these international trips where at times you can kind of see kids' worldviews change right before your own eyes in the course of a week. And I think that, you know, lacrosse is a powerful platform for education, like as is music and the ball field and the classroom. But we've got a classroom that comes to life out on the field and have the ability to really connect with kids and teach and learn, that help them be influenced by this game in a way where some of these unfortunate problems that we have, we're fortunate that we have a platform like lacrosse to help change them. And, you know, give thanks to Pete and your ancestors for sharing this beautiful platform with us. And it's an honor and responsibility to use it to impact the common good and hopefully make a difference in whatever small way we can. So thank you, Matt, for having us on. It's been great.
And again, thank you all for taking the time and sharing so personally to better the sport. And that's what we're all about. So we appreciate those of you that watched, and we'll continue in 2 weeks. We'll have the holiday week off with our next episode. So thanks for watching. We're done. And you guys, good job. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I'll make sure everyone has a full
Thank y'all.
numbers and which it's called emails by tomorrow. And then also once we get the link set up, I'll get that to you. I try to get you the link and then like a general image to use if you want to do it on social media, Twitter, so forth. If any of you want to embed this into like a website or something, just let me know. I can get you that code. These are not something that I'm keeping like reins on. So if you watch one of the other episodes, like, hey, can we get that embed code to put on our website or something? I'm happy to get it to you. They all end up being YouTube style videos, so they're useful for any platform.
Awesome.
Yeah, like I said, send me your referrals if you got people that are can have a reasonable conversation. And I say that jokingly but seriously, because I've turned down somebody I knew because they've never shown me that they could have a reasonable conversation. So instead of me using the power of, let me just delete you as the call's going, I just did rather not have it on. I knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet. 11 episodes, I haven't had to mute somebody, but so yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Discussion, you know, feel free to give me a shout or email. Matt will share that with everybody. So yeah. I'm always open to continue the conversation.
Awesome.
I think
Thanks, Pete.
That last idea of, bless you, of having like tournament blessings and so forth, because they do it in Hawaii. They have one, which is pretty neat. And I can't remember the other event I was at. They did it. I think that's a great thing. And I don't know, pardon my ignorance, but I don't know how many Indigenous folks are around the country. But I'm learning that there's pockets just about everywhere, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's something we could all encourage organizers to do, is to at least contact someone like yourself that can help steer them to contacting a regional entity that could fulfill that need, and and do it in a nice way, and do it in a professional way, and not just as some gimmick to their event.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely, with the Hawaii lacrosse tournament, they have one of the Masters guys do.
Is that who I was always wondered who did that? I'm like, oh.
Well, we did it once on behalf of Squamish Nation, but I think one of the tournament organizers, Ed, I can't remember his last name. You might know him.
Yeah, Eddie. Yeah.
Yeah, he did part of it for the Polynesian community,
Mhm.
welcoming to the territory of obviously beautiful Hawaii. But he recognized the people, the land that they were on, and then passed it over to us and gave us the opportunity, to come in peace but play lacrosse, right? As a nation, let's say. But it does give an opportunity for culture, it does give an opportunity for protocol, but it also recognizes, the creator.
Yeah.
Which is so awesome. At any point you can have that opportunity to do so.
And then Curtis, are you working with Thomas and Harry Alford?
I am.
Yeah. Harry, I've gotten to know him over the years, and he was on a couple episodes ago. He was touching on that he's been in touch. They've had some good conversations. Pose a question to the panel by emailing us at ot@emwf.org. We'd love to hear from you.